Alright, so with Captain America Brave New World, the upcoming MCU title that releases in theaters next week on February 14th, and we have like a long history of Captain America in the MCU, especially from Chris Evans portraying the character of Steve Rogers, and now with Sam Wilson as going to be taking on the responsibility as the new Captain America as well. So in this video, I'm going to be recapping and break down Captain America's journey in the MCU from Captain America the First Avenger, Captain America Brave New World, and that's where we're seeing Sam Wilson's journey unfold, especially after Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well, and also some MCU movie recommendations if you haven't been caught up yet as well. And so, if you're new, then be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so as on any future videos, we'll be covering Cap Brave New World when it comes out, all that stuff. But now, let's get right into it. And now, this is beginning with Chris Evans' portrayal of Steve Rogers as the super soldier Captain America in Captain America the First Avenger, released in 2011. And now, especially with Steve that wants to get into the military, that's what we started the movie off with, but then was rejected because of poor health and weight conditions, because of his parents' death that affected all of his past, especially as at the time he's from Brooklyn, New York, and getting beaten up by bullies, especially with Bucky Barnes, and to helping him like get there and to save him, especially with Steve and Bucky, and that we've seen their friendship unfold. And honestly, I love the two together as because Bucky was about to head off, and especially with Bucky that saw Steve that wanted to get into the military or to put himself at risk, especially with Dr. Erskine. I saw a look at him and wanted to accept him into the military to see how good he performed. And then with Steve now in the military, that he falls for the love interest, Peggy Carter. And even with Steve that wanted to join the super soldier program, but with Dr. Erskine, to save him with the side effects that could be really bad, and especially with Red Skull that wanted to become like a super soldier. It didn't work out well for him. But even though with Steve and Peggy that traveled to the antique shop, and that the underground was the layer for Steve Rogers to turn into Captain America, because especially with the experiment, and especially when that transformation unfold, like especially when it was done, we see Steve Rogers fully jacked with Steve Rogers, and now like has to take on the threat of Red Skull, who was the main threat of that movie, the villain, and you with Steve Rogers being on tour as the Captain America, and for his fame offered him, but now his purpose was to fight, and that's why he would later join and become the leader of the Avengers. And plus, I liked what Chris Evans done in the role, and even though like towards the end of that movie it was so emotional when Steve died, tried to save the world, and this was to take place during the events of World War II, and it was really tough times for Steve. And then we move on to the Avengers from 2012, and I mean this all began with Nick Fury recruited Steve Rogers to retrieve the Tesseract after Loki escaped, and this was the whole purpose when Steve became the leader of the Avengers. And Nick Fury wanted to assemble the group on the helicarrier to locate the Tesseract, and especially when this whole recruiting process, and you with Steve observing everything that he wants to do everything right, especially for what he did to his country after the first Captain America movie, after defeating Red Skull, with Captain America's journey that followed, especially following the Battle of New York. And that's what I adore from this character, because Captain America has some sick moves, and to fight off the alien invasion, because with Loki's purpose that he wants to take over New York and held all that hostage with an alien army. And that's what it really progressed for Steve and his entire character arc, and that's why the Avengers won. And now moving on to Captain America the Winter Soldier, released in 2014, where we get introduced to Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie, and with Steve and Sam working together. And this was because the whole purpose of that movie with the title of Winter Soldier, because with Bucky Barnes, who died in the very first Cap film, who was brought back to life by Hydra by turning him into a brainwashed assassin to take people out, and because especially for what they did to him, and especially what Nick Fury was associated with. Because with Steve, I thought he put everything behind him, and now especially as he's being targeted. Even with this movie, like it's one of my top favorite MCU films of all time. Especially I think it gave us so good action sequences, including the elevator fight scene. I definitely recommend watching Captain America: The Winter Soldier, because we get to see Sam Wilson as the Falcon in action, and with the way that it is pulled off, Steve's purpose was to go after it, the Winter Soldier, and especially with the fight scene between Steve and Bucky, and with the Winter Soldier revealing his identity as Bucky Barnes. And there's some so cool action moments, and even towards the end when Captain America and the Winter Soldier were fighting on that carrier, until Steve said to just finish the fight, because even with Steve Rogers that has said, because I'm with you till the end of the line, and he says to Bucky to just finish it, and then because we all thought that Captain America was dead, because even with Bucky that chose to save his life, especially Bucky being a brainwashed Hydra assassin to drag Steve out of the water. We see him in the hospital next to Sam, because even though when we were introduced to Sam Wilson in The Winter Soldier, I really had a feel for him, especially for what his past was, especially in the military, and with his wingman, and especially with the Falcon that had those wings, and towards the end of that film, and with Steve and Sam that were gonna go after Bucky. And next up is Avengers: Age of Ultron, released in 2015, and with the way that he's now become the leader of the Avengers after what happened with the Winter Soldier movie, and now to being a team again with the Avengers, especially what the Avengers were up against, and that is with Ultron, who wanted to destroy the entire world. And honestly, the Avengers really felt like a family during this movie, and also gave us the introduction of Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda Maximoff. And even for what this movie has set its tone towards, it's some crazy action, and also just with the relationship between the characters, it is really so cool. And even though I like this second installment of the Avengers and what the journey the Avengers had to go on, even in the flashbacks that we see Steve seeing Peggy in his vision when he was under Wanda's control, and just to see that in his memories, it is truly heartbreaking. And plus, I think it'll later come up again in Avengers Endgame, which I'll get to in a bit in this recap. But just to see Steve in his flashbacks, because even though Wanda did this with everybody, including for Tony, Natasha, and Thor, and it's just so crazy. The end with Steve now becoming a full leader and now controlling the Avengers. I like Age of Ultron, and the Avengers really progressed their journey as a family. And next up is Captain America: Civil War, released in 2016, and for me, even with this being a Captain America movie, but it really felt like Avengers 2.5, because not only was Captain America in the picture, but also with Bucky Barnes, Wanda Maximoff, Black Widow, Iron Man, and Vision, and it was the ultimate showdown between these heroes. It also gave us our introduction to Spider-Man in the MCU, so I applaud Marvel for that. And even it introduced the Sokovia Accords that with Thaddeus Ross that want to split the Avengers apart, and after what they've done in the world, to see them as a threat. But even though with the team that was divided, who agreed on the Sokovia Accords, who is really against it, and even with Steve, Tony, they were up against each other. They want to fight it, because especially within the third act, that's when it really goes crazy. Especially with Iron Man that gets defeated by Captain America, and just with that drama that happened, also a top tier MCU movie for me, because it really gave us some division between the Avengers, with Steve Rogers and when he had to be put up against, especially fighting Tony. But it really set up everything, especially towards the end of that film, for when half the Avengers were put in prison. But then towards the end of that film, we see Steve bailing Sam and Natasha out, because they were now going into hiding, and that's what led into Avengers Infinity War released in 2018, with these character groupings, it really worked because I really loved Infinity War and Endgame because those were the hype machines of our time, especially from the Russo brothers, and because especially Steve, Natasha, and Sam fighting part of Thanos' army. To stop Thanos from retrieving all the Infinity Stones and to wipe out half of the population. I really liked how Steve's journey was progressed, especially from the first Avenger, and Infinity War and Endgame became an event because, especially with the half of the heroes that became dusted, especially along with Sam Wilson as well, and you with Steve lying there, and now they had to lead their purpose into defeating Thanos, and what are they gonna do now? And now that half the population is gone, and that's what led into Avengers Endgame from 2019, and that was the ultimate event of the year. I mean, especially if you were around that time, and even with the Avengers' purpose is to retrieve the Infinity Stones and to undo what Thanos did, and especially as it gave the characters the ultimate send-off. That's with Tony Stark, Natasha Romanoff with the Soul Stone, and even it gave Steve Rogers that send-off as Captain America, and we all thought oh god, that was over for him, because especially towards the end of that film, when we saw old Steve gave the shield over to Sam because it is really his, and that's where it really leads things up to him taking on the responsibility for what he has to handle in the upcoming Brave New World movie, and that's where it gets so emotional from there. And even in that film, for when Steve and Tony were going to retrieve a copy of the Tesseract at the military base, and that's when Steve really had that moment of seeing Peggy, as he didn't get to spend that moment of the life that he never get to have because of his mission with Steve. It turned out to be a very happy ending for him as he got to live out his life with Peggy Carter. What I have listed in this video with recommendations, and that's with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, especially with all you that aren't caught up with the MCU yet or want to learn more about Captain America's journey throughout the entirety of the MCU, especially for the Infinity Saga. And now is your time now. And now moving on to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That is one of the very first MCU Disney Plus shows released and introduced into the Phase 4 slate back when the MCU was moving into Disney Plus television, and that gave us the dynamic team up between Sam and Bucky, because even with Bucky that was having problems going to a therapist, especially after being a brainwashed Hydra assassin, but then he was helping with the Avengers. Sam's purpose was, even though it was to become Captain America, but then he suddenly wanted to give up the shield because of his speech, but then it was later hand on the mantle to John Walker, who we're also going to see in the upcoming Thunderbolts movie, and then that's what gave Sam to and not get that shield, but because they didn't want to see a Black Captain America in the mix, because I mean that's where it introduced stuff in the real world, and also gave us the introduction to the Flag Smashers. And also we see in this important moment during Bucky and Sam's therapy session was that moment from when Bucky said to Sam, Steve believed in you, why did you give up that shield? Because Sam said because he thought what he did was right, but then with John Walker, and that was gonna do become famous and become the new Captain America. But now with Bucky and Sam's mission is to get the shield from John Walker, and it introduced real violence that was never unfolded in the MCU, showing all that. And towards the end of that show, it gave us Sam Wilson as our brand new Captain America. And even though with people that did not like the ending very much, but even though I was very happy of seeing that. And what we're going to see in the upcoming movie is, of course, Sam Wilson taking on Captain America to prove to the world that if he's willing to take on the responsibility, and even though with the world that is looking at him differently, because especially that this is not Steve Rogers, this is not Chris Evans, especially as this is a different Captain America. And of course, we're going to see him go up against Red Hulk. I'm expecting some big action-packed stuff to go down that classic MCU action, and plus this is gonna set up more future stuff that we already know. That Marvel has been marketing the heck out of this movie by showing us trailers and like weird CGI and that color saturation. But even though with fans that will look at this movie differently or not, it depends on your opinion. But I mean, I don't mind. But it depends on how well this movie performs. I guess we'll have to wait and see. And I'm excited to see to have that type of military element, that type of action that Sam Wilson now has to take on. And with Thaddeus Ross being involved, I'm definitely excited to see for how they pull this off in terms of its movie announcement after that show. And especially if you people want to get all caught up, I definitely recommend watching The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because that's where Sam's arc really opens up. And that's all you gotta know before seeing Captain America Brave New World. And again, all of the list of MCU movie recommendations is the one that I would start off by watching, or if you want to give it a rewatch but before Brave New World hits theaters, I definitely would recommend that you do so. And yeah, I mean, I'm very excited for it myself, so stay tuned for like everyday review, post-credit scene explain videos, and all the other fun stuff as well. So yeah, and so this was really fun recapping Captain America's story from the first Avenger all the way up until now. And now we have Brave New World coming out next week, and I am very excited for all of it. Plus, it's a new MCU movie coming out during Valentine's Day, February 14th. So what do you expect? But that's going to do it for this video. Just let me know in the comments below and what were your thoughts on my recap. And so especially if you're excited for Captain America Brave New World, or if you're someone that is still a doubter and don't want to see this movie, but just let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to notifications about future videos. Also follow all my social medias, all linked down below. And with that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.